Hi there, Reality Riffing. I had the most sublime conversation with the angelic channel and the incredible frequency and man that Stewart Pearce is. He truly holds a vision for humanity and a connectivity to the archangelic realms that is beyond. And I've known him for some years. We talk a little bit about some of the ways that he was one of the people who told me when I first met him all about a part of what we're working on at Rama, which is Rama University and its function in this new era on planet Earth. And so we had a very interesting first meeting, and it's blossomed into a beautiful friendship. And I hadn't been able to speak to him for quite a while. And so when we sat down to have this conversation, it was just ecstatic to really hold the vibration. And so I hope you enjoy just going into this angelic frequency, and also the sound current that Stuart holds is just kind of auditory bliss. And he'll explain more about the work that he does with sound and consciousness, and his forthcoming book about his work with Princess Diana. I hope you enjoy. I am so honored and so blessed to be able to sit down in conversation and heart melding with the great Stewart Pearce. He's a legendary master of voice, radiance, mentor, and an angelic emissary. And just welcome, Stuart. Thank you for being here.
Well, it's an absolute joy. So, I mean, a great honor for you to invite me. So, it's great to see you again. I mean, we haven't seen each other for 4 or 5 years, so
I know.
wonderful to come back and just fold into the energies within your field and all that you represent. So, blessings to you and thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. And I'll just dive in for a little mini story, which is when I met Stuart, I had heard all of these incredible things about you, and I came in and you took one look at me and said, "Oh, there's this very tall kind of yogi that's standing behind you," and you instantaneously saw my lineage when I walked in, and I've held that besides all the other amazing things that you've told me during that first meeting of minds and hearts. That was just one of the most incredible experiences. So Stuart has a mass of connectivity to all the dimensions, and I would love for those who don't know. I know it's a story that you tell a lot, but I would love for you to just tell a little bit of the Harmonic Convergence experience, kind of what opened the realms for you.
And if I may drop in, of course, the pantheon that is around you as a result of the extraordinary experiences, I'm sure individualized by you in your own individuation process, the growth, the evolution, but also what we then talked about. I remember now, being in your field, we talked about the growth of what your dream was. But now, of course, the pantheon has expanded hugely. So the gentleman that I realize is Yogi Bhajan, and there is Paramahansa Yogananda. And the lineage that I'm very closely associated with, which is Sathya Sai Baba.
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Something very remarkable opened to me in 1987 when I was really beginning to open to the professional aspect of what it would be to use my seership, not just leave my mysticism in a closet, but really come forth into the world. And a friend of mine had just opened a very successful crystal store in Glastonbury in the United Kingdom, where I happen to be at the moment. and said, look, there's going to be this harmonic convergence event, August 15, 16, 17, 1987. Would you please come down because you're going to be very useful. We're going to be bombarded by people, and your perception, your intuitive perception, your psyche is so penetrative that it will really help people if you can do just, 30-minute readings or something. And I was really beginning to expand the musculature of what my field was all about, as it were, the way that my field was interfacing with my physical temple, and how my third eye had pinged open about nine years earlier through the death of my mother. I was very open as a child, and spoke copiously about what I was seeing, and then I soon discovered that few people understood what I was talking about. And this was in the post-Second World War years, and of course it was something you just didn't talk about. Fairies, angels. So I shut up, literally. I self-muted for 2 years and closed down the energy. I didn't know what I was doing. I just closed down and contracted. And so this was a great opening. So there I was, August weekend, 1987, hearing about this thing called the Harmonic Convergence. I think I'd read Jose Argoles' statement about 144,000 rainbow light warriors were going to be awoken by the Mayan prophecy, but I didn't know what it meant. I was just there to have fun. Lo and behold, more fun was had than I was actually. So I worked all morning and felt absolutely drained by the energies, because we understand that Glastonbury is the heart chakra of the world, but I was feeling very drained by the energies. And so by that time, of course, I visited Sai Baba, and he'd said, meditate. So I knew I had to go and meditate somewhere. So I went onto the tor, the high hill, and meditated. And in the middle of this meditation, I heard this extraordinary chorus of harmonics in this symphony, and opened my eyes in bewilderment and saw in front of me 12 huge orbs of light. I mean, vast orbs of light that were suspended 50 feet up in the air. And I heard in my consciousness, we are the angels of Atlantis, and we are going to give you the prophecy of the fact that you will create a temple of sound healing known as the alchemy of voice, and that you will be tuning people into their note, into the anahata, so that they can really understand ways of being able to open their hearts to the furtherance of their spiritual evolutionary process. And a bolt of lightning moved through my heart on a diagonal, and the rest is history.
Right.
Then everything changed.
Yeah. And I mean, I will also mention that, kind of previous to this, I mean, you have this kind of aura, but you were working with Princess Diana, you were working with Margaret Thatcher. I mean, you had this kind of huge public life. And then this was a shift into another a mission, as it were.
Yes, it's interesting that my destiny has always drawn me to serve great women in history, the change makers, thought leaders. And so in 1980, as you were saying, I was called to work with Margaret Thatcher. So I'm known as the man who gave Thatcher her voice. When, of course, her career as a politician wasn't as aligned, perhaps, as a number of major social innovators at that time. And we saw that through the end of her power, through the end of her regime, rather, she was perceived to misuse her power. I found her extraordinary at that time. She came as a revolutionary and really improved the whole substance of the British economy. The fact that it didn't actually have further sustainability is possibly neither here nor there. It just needed to go into another evolutionary leap. And she had served. So very extraordinary. And then other wonderful women, such as Benazir Bhutto, who was the president of Pakistan, and was bringing an arousal of the divine feminine, 25 years ago, before she was assassinated. She was extraordinary, a very beautiful, intelligent woman. And then a very extraordinary British politician known as Mo Mowlam, who I worked with for 2 years. And Mo was responsible for the peace accord between the IRA and the Sinn Féin, the terrible, terrible internal battle that was going on in Northern Ireland. So I've always been there
Yeah.
seeing extraordinary change makers. And
Yeah.
then, of course, as you were saying, Diana, Princess of Wales, the last 2 years of her life. Little did we know that. I just came along as the Martin Bashir BBC Panorama interview was broadcast to something in the region of about 33 million people. And Diana looked at herself and realized that she wanted to work on her voice and also work on the physical dexterity of her presentation process. And so I was approached and felt very honored and said, yes, but can we have a confidential relationship? And she agreed to it. And very fortunate because the circus around her, including the paparazzi, was very, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
So I was able to be her confidant and to support her in the spiritual evolution of her process because she was very aware of her purpose. She was very aware of fulfilling her soul's destiny and becoming the peace ambassadress that she was. But of course, being an empath, she needed to find ways of being able to create effective and successful energetic boundaries so that she could literally just hold the light. And so the book that I've just published is all about the development of her radiance, igniting her radiance through the I am presence, and really being able to hold what was taking place in her energy field.
Well, I will say, I'm just going to say this for you, and I'm sure you would say it differently, but I'm going to be like I'll be like a Jewish mom right now. But this is, you've had hundreds of thousands of lifetimes doing this. I mean, this is this is not your first rodeo. Neither was it Diana's. And so this is part of kind of the when you start to just look at the bigger eons of time, which I think is very important right now for perspective. I don't know what your opinion on that is, but
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, yes, I would I can't really speak what you've just said because
yeah,
I'm just a little me.
yeah,
As His Holiness the Dalai Lama would say, I'm just a humble monk.
yeah,
Well, I guess I'm a humble priest,
yeah, yeah,
even though I'm not wearing a collar.
yeah,
Um, and yes, my master is Saint Germain, but
yeah,
through all the varying incarnations,
yeah,
and he's been with me for 45 years. It's just that, really, as you were saying, my public career meant that I was very not clandestine at all, but I was always very respectful of other people's beliefs and ways of being.
yeah,
And even though there I was, part of the major project of recreating or reconstructing Shakespeare's Globe Theatre, starting in '96, and working with the great Mark Rylance, the great actor Mark Rylance, who was my prima facie client actor. So I was asked not to bring forth my spirituality too strongly because there were other people that weren't necessarily in coherence with it. And so when in Rome, do as the Romans.
right,
But then
right,
10 years ago, I realized that I could no longer allow my mysticism to be held in a closet.
yeah,
And I resigned all of my establishment positions and just opened my wings and flew. And that's, of course, when I guess the elements that you were just addressing started to really come into the forefront of my consciousness. And I knew that I was here stationed, as many of us are, as listening posts in oceans of sound to bring forth a particular message. And it was an ancient, ancient message. And yet here we are in the unusualness of what time plays for us. I know that we're beginning to wrinkle time as time lords and ladies, but at the same time, this is a remarkable portal. And here we are speaking between the solar eclipse on Monday, the 14th of December, and the 21st,
yeah.
which is just extraordinary.
It's amazing, and I would love to just get anything you'd like to share with us about these times, and obviously this, what we're in right now, this pocket, this major kind of quantum pocket, but also just anything else. I mean, we were talking before we started the interview, just the richness of 2020 and the kind of gifts thereof. And I would just love to hear anything that you feel is relevant about these times and how to maneuver them and what to be focused on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that, in response to your statement, your question, my being automatically reflects on 2020. And of course, it has been a very unusual year, the most unique as a social phenomenon on our planet because of the level of suffering that has been global. And my heart immediately goes to those people who have suffered. And in the early part of the crisis, in the early part of the global pause, I was working with two doctors in this city of London who wanted me to shadow them in ICU. So I went in and was with COVID, so to speak, in the bodies of those people going. So my love and my grace goes to many of the people that have suffered, and may their suffering be alleviated. And for those who have passed, my feeling is that they gave of themselves to go back into source because it was time for them to go as a result of this remarkable revolution that is taking place, where the empaths stepped forward, and that by their passing, they were able to create huge waves of portal energy to enable the great photonic shafts of light to come into our planet to enable us to move through this extraordinary time of change. And so from that, I then look forward, great blessings to the departed ones, and see that this portal is just remarkable. So the interpretation that I'm given through these two basic resources, meaning the greatness of my master, Saint Germain, and the 12 angels of Atlantis, that they have said to me that, in fact, the story began with, do you remember the Lord Maitreya? And of course, yes. And the fact that the prophecy was that the Lord Maitreya would emerge in this city, and that 40 years ago he was already here and living in the Asian community. In England, this really means with the people who were from the subcontinent of India, and and that he was working as a cobbler. And eventually he would step forward, and as he stepped forward, he would announce himself as the cosmic Christ. Well, we've all been waiting, and he hasn't appeared.
Right.
And I understand vis-a-vis this unique portal of the grand conjunct between Jupiter and Saturn that actually the cosmic law mechanism that this was attenuating to has been changed. And that what's happening is that Saint Germain is the cosmic Christ. Will he reincarnate? No. He's staying in the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th dimension.
Yeah.
And the rays of energy from the galactic heart, the Christos rays, are being sent to we empaths. So this is beginning the revolution of the empaths. And of course, you guys have just produced a president-elect who is one of the greatest empaths in Congress.
Fascinating.
So we haven't seen anything yet from this man called
Yeah.
Joe Biden.
Yeah.
But when he steps into the solemn plea of the inauguration, that a mantle that is already in his etheric field is going to come into his physical vessel, and his heart will literally send a wave of light of untold proportion. It's
Wow.
going to be a huge healing for the whole world because obviously United States America, for us global citizens, is our big brother, and we've been looking at this United States America for the last 4 years in utter disbelief.
Right.
And now that the shift is taking place, there is the beginning of a sigh of relief, a wave of relief, which is literally moving through everybody's hearts. There's a celebration going on in every single country around the world beyond the United States.
Wow, interesting. And I love this revolution of empaths. I love this term that you're using. In terms of this particular 0 degrees conjunction, Saturn and Jupiter, which is so historic, do you have any information about whether it's the end of the Kali Yuga or the beginning of the age of Aquarius, or like how would you describe the kind of portal that's opening right now?
Well, I'm a good student, so I listen. I listen to my unseen master, and I believe that we are no longer dawning. We are actually in the vision of becoming. We passed through the portal.
Yeah.
And now we're beginning to feel the effects of it. Because isn't it extraordinary that so many of us have been gone through, as we've all gone through this extraordinary time of COVID, economic uncertainty, and the quaking geopolitical landscapes, that actually here we are feeling extraordinary with such likeness in our beings, with such love, and the palpability of love that I'm experiencing around me within the community, which for me is a broad community like you,
Yeah.
because I have a global witness, is
Yeah.
just extraordinary. And that people are really learning not to react to some of the rather, what can we call them, horrible things that are happening on 3D level, but are really responding to creating a brave new world. So it seems that the global meditation that we've been part of over the last 45 or 50 years in a very conscious way is really having its effect, because our neural
Yeah.
pathways have been prepared. And so
Hmm.
they're now all shimmering light. And as a result, we're all beginning to see a way of stepping into the brave new world. So I feel we're in Aquarius. And of course, the time of Aquarius is the heart opening of the empathic. And so, isn't it interesting? I'm sure you found this. I know through talking, because I developed a platform through this. I had to develop a platform,
Yeah.
which is called Deep Dialogues, and meeting once a week with a celebrity around the world. I mean, I'm thinking of a celebrity within the mind, body, spirit industry,
Hmm.
of unique people like Robert Holden and Leander Van Sant and Christian Northrup, talking about what their perception is, and everybody is saying, isn't this an extraordinary wave of energy that I feel so creative? I may feel much more creative than I've ever felt before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even, the horror story in 3D is that there's some form of destruction taking place.
Yeah.
So I feel that this is all part of the fact that we've walked through the portal, and now we're beginning to perceive the waves of consciousness that we will travel on
Mm.
into higher and higher and higher levels of consciousness. But at the same time, as always, I have this perception that it's not just simply, I know many of us have a preoccupation with this sense of ascension. And for me, it's more about descension, actually.
Mm.
It's about really drawing spirit into matter. And one of my contributions is the notion of the voice of change, and how the voice of change really affects an opening within the heart, so that we get away from the cerebral, that
Right.
constant, I won't go on doing it, but that constant level of frequency, which has
Yeah.
become the currency of the Western world, which is
Totally.
simply to do with this conversation going on between the two hemispheres. We've been educated and socialized into this. And now we're waking up to, no, let's change our vibration. If words arise from the heart, they enter the heart.
Mm.
If words arise from the tongue alone, they don't pass beyond the ears. So we're all beginning to recognize, I feel, that the heart is the seat of the soul, and that we need to move into the empathic, loving vibration. So
Mm.
this is what I'm picking up, and therefore, of course, we know that we're finishing a vast cosmic cycle. So the Kali Yuga period is now beginning to transform into another Kali period. And I feel that I'm very drawn to the aspect and the mythology of Egypt as a contribution to our spiritual lives, which is all to do with the substance of my antecedents in Atlantis. So
Yeah.
I've been visiting Egypt for 50 years and running retreats there very effectively twice a year for about 15, 20 years. This year, of course, I'm not going to be there.
Right.
And so, not to be thwarted, I've created a virtual resurrection retreat, which will happen this weekend to
Mm.
finalize on the 21st, because
Mm.
on the 21st, the winter solstice, the sun rises in the great temple of Karnak. It's the only day of the year where the sun rises at a
Right.
particular angle and burns into the Holy of Holies, which of course is built of red granite. So it literally becomes an oven for God, just for 7 minutes, and then it passes on its ascension into heaven. So we will be there, literally. We'll be there virtually. So when I look at the Kali extraction, I'm reminded of the great dance of Sekhmet, who I believe is the other vessel of Kali
Yeah.
in that particular philosophy.
Mm.
And so Sekhmet is very alive to me. And so Sekhmet teaches that the rivers are going to cease running with blood, and the great white flame of purification is going to be coming in.
Wow, thank you for so eloquently expressing many things that are inexpressible in so many ways, but you are just, the what comes from you that's lost in translation is really important. So thank you
Oh,
for
bless you. Thank you.
translating that for us. Um, and I think there's a very important message around that ascension descension thing, because I do feel like it's very easy. We've been joking around about ascension symptoms, and in my tradition, all of those symptoms are ultimately the nervous system not being strong enough to kind of handle these waves of energy, which you can do something about. You can strengthen the nervous system. You can do it with sound, which you just showed us. Very, specifically, you can strengthen your whole system through shifting and listening and falling in love with your own sound and finding your true sound, which is really, I know a lot of what you help people to do in many different ways. But so, I think that evocation, rather than this some kind of another kind of, trying to find something outside of ourselves, but the evocation of the shifting of frequency, that being kind of a bringing from heaven to earth rather than the other way around. I think that's really important right now to get.
Well, yes, yes, yes. Because we're already tuning into the extraordinary intelligence of the fact that we know sound is at the core of creation. And what's interesting through the development of modern science, really from the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment, noise has occurred within our bodies. And so, particularly here, and now, of course, through industrialization and capitalization, we've created machines that create a huge amount of noise that have really dashed so many of our meridian lines and our neural pathways into just being part of the cacophony. And now I feel that what we're actually saying is that we're all hearing an unheard hum, which is the hum or the aum of heaven, and that is actually reaching us from the galactic heart, probably amplified by our extraterrestrial friends who are
Mm,
really very aware of what's taking place on this planet because it's such a unique cosmic experiment, the only planet of choice. And of course, they're not in flesh, so they're really intrigued by how do you do all this in your body? Your bodies are so dense. How did you do that? Which I find is quite wonderful. But
yeah.
actually, yes, I mean, what a miracle that stroke was. But as a result of that, it seems that this extraordinary, the great Om, is moving deep into our bodies. And as a result of that, our neural pathways and meridian lines are really beginning to shimmer with this light. And as a result of that, we're moving to the song of our souls. So we see it in the primary way, don't we, by the ability that people are achieving by moving into the success of their organic pathway, their purpose to optimize their creativity full of love and joy. And their stories are one of miracles that happen and magic that happens as soon as we align with the path. Well, that level of mirth, that delight, is really what the universe is all about, isn't it? That I was having a conversation yesterday with a quantum physicist who wants to speak at the UN when he can speak at the UN. If it's not in person, it will be online, but is feeling very, as we all do, very nervous about it. And so I have a series of programs that I used or constructs that I used to bring him deeper into his body. So he was beginning to have fun. And I said, what do you feel the universe really is? And he said to me, well, of course, and then launched into a mathematical formula of quantum physics.
Right.
And I said, so you feel that a supernova is just made of quantum quarks and quantum foam. Anything else? And he said, well, not particularly. And I said, okay, well, where I'm coming from, I believe that a supernova is a cosmic orgasm. And, the more that we actually connect with the delight of that extraordinary evocation, we're going to actually look into the mind of God. And that's really what God is saying to us right now. He said, I've never thought of it like that, but that's how it feels to me. I'm just using a linguistic that is actually relevant for my brothers or sisters in the science community. But I've
Yeah.
always felt that way. So we had this huge conversation about the cosmology of feeling and how feeling is the language of the soul, not thinking, it's feeling. And so if we could move into these pathways of joy and effervescence and moving towards the substance of ecstasy or samadhi, then, well, I feel where our soul's trajectory is very precise and we're really fulfilling the destiny and the prophecy, what Homo sapien is all about. As we move into Homo noeticus and Homo luminis, we become human angels.
Yes. And I mean, I think in the yogic scriptures, this is kind of the whole game, is that you're the revelation and this experience, not just the information, but the revelation and then the true embodiment on all kind of dimensions of the experience of the angelic human hybridization of ecstasy, the intercourse of that is really the the evolution of the human experience.
Absolutely. And what's so extraordinary is I often find myself speaking about the Kundalini pathway of excellence. And some of the frames of reference that you've just imparted about the complete embodiment of the process, and how in ancient Egypt there was a complete parallel. Well, of course there was, because so much of the technology had been developed through the early civilizations of Lemuria and Atlantis. And then when the great shift came about that we see as a destruction, but was really a completion of one civilization and the development of another, looking towards the Middle East with Egypt and Sumeria, we know that the high priests and priestesses took what we could consider to be the Kundalini pathway of excellence and turned it into their philosophy, which they called a scarification. And so the high priest was the pharaoh or the queen, and they were taken through a series of initiations and rituals where they literally became the Aksu, they became the shining ones. So it's the same principle, isn't it? They became the shining ones to such an extent that the embodiment of their process was that wherever they were the emanating principle of the love that is now and forevermore, which is the infinitely unfolding creative possibility that the cosmos is, the mind of God. So I've often been, sort of humorously titillated, I suppose, by the parallels that are existing and how they arise out of different areas of human consciousness in terms of the geography or the topography of our land.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a book that I wrote about it, which unfortunately is not in print at the moment. But next year I will make sure that it comes into print through my publisher, which is called Angels and the Keys to Paradise, where I went through a remarkable experience about 8, 9 years ago, where a being that was alive 4,000 years ago came to me, one of the high priests, the high priest of Akhenaten and Tutankhamun, who were evidently very extraordinary in the sense that they were embodying a new way of being at that time in Earth's history. And I was shown the 9 keys to paradise that they utilized to observe the process of ossification. And when I look at it and I then examine the other parallels that exist, for example, through the wonderment of your particular tradition and lineage, there are so many parallels because I
So
have
many.
friends, Kundalini brahmachari, so
Yeah.
they say, oh, well, that's what we're taught, this is my meditation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in terms of the question that you asked about, Are we still dawning in Aquarius? Are we in Aquarius? What is this portal?
Yeah.
I feel that one of the social mechanisms or one of the social characteristics is that many of us have been very alone, purposefully alone, in the solidarity of our own process, developing this extraordinary communion with the divine, because as we all know, alone is just a rather absurd construct that we've been associated with within the social dynamics of the patriarchy. And now we're beginning to realize there is no alone, all there is all one. And so here we are in communion with the divine. And as a result of that, our aloneness is now in amplifying and is encouraging us into collaboration. So, you came into my meditation 3 weeks ago, and then the following day there was an email from you saying, Stuart, would you like to come on to? And I thought, well, of course. And
Right.
then I thought, well, quid pro quo, I'm going to ask Guru Jagat if she would mind coming on to Deep Dialogues in January
Yeah.
and to begin the whole season with some very extraordinary ladies. Marianne will be there, Iyanla Van Sant will be there. Some very, even Jacinta Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, said that she would be willing to give me half an hour.
Amazing.
So,
Amazing.
I know.
Amazing. Which is, I think also indicative of just, the level at which you're moving the matrix, and what's the importance that you're working with some of these people who are creating certain aspects of the matrix on planet Earth. I mean, this is very, very important.
And all under the auspices of the voice of change,
Yeah.
because they're recognizing that their voices need to embody a level of vibration which is a very old level of vibration, because it's the vibration of the heart, but that hitherto over the last 450 years has not really been used.
Yeah.
So
Or
now
longer than that.
or longer. Well, of course, the area that I'm really interested in is within dramatic literature is the Elizabethan period. Hence, me being involved in the training of the actor for 40 years. And training the voice classically, how do you speak those words and make them credible rather than just becoming a puppet?
Right.
How do you speak Shakespeare? And of course, the whole of the tenor of that society was in pure respondence to the divine nature of sound. There was a Lord Mayor of London in 1597 who said, all speech was decorated silence. That means something huge to me, because that's before the noise, you see.
Yeah.
So all we had were natural sounds. And the church bell that organized time for people, and the town crier, and then everything else was natural. People's body sounds, yelling voices, splish splash of people rowing, no motors. It's interesting.
So fascinating. It's so, I just love, wow, I could really geek out with you on that. Because, we're followers of the sound. We're devotees of the sound. And so, this is something both intellectually, I've been fascinated in terms of, following these different pathways of sound and where they come from, and the glyphs that make them, and the dimensions that they were pulled through to create certain letters and certain sounds, and where it hits the body and the organs and the endocrine system and the neuro. I'm so into it, so I'd love to hear you talk about this stuff.
And just reflecting this wisdom you've imparted in relation to the Elizabethans, they were very aware of it.
Yeah.
Because after all, 95% of the population could not read. And when we don't read, we hear sound in a completely different way. So they were actually part of the metaphoric consciousness of feeling. So they were so sensate that their bodies were literally holding vast eons of sound.
Wow.
One of the things that I had the great joy of doing at the beginning of the project of the reconstruction of Shakespeare's Globe is going with the master craftsman, the master woodsman, to choose the wood to build the theatre, which was English oak. So he went into forests that were thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. And he has the ability to read the age of the trees. He showed me the rings. And so we chose wood that was alive when Shakespeare was alive. So in other words, the wood is full of the resonance of all of Shakespeare's words. The spoken word is there. And that wood is now part of the fabric of the theatre, English oak, apart from two trees that keep the earth and the heavens suspended on the stage. So, because it's all sacred geometry. I mean, the cosmos is held within the theatre.
Wow. Wow. I did not
So
know
when
that.
those of us at the beginning of the project there were seven of us that we were all awakened by early mysticism. I mean, in the sense that in the early parts of our lives, we
Right.
became aware of spirit, we became aware of our souls, and therefore initiated ourselves into the practice of, being in attendance to the divine.
Wow.
And so we were able to exhume much of the information that was around at that time. The sacred circle, the feminine of the theatre, all the world's a stage, and the square, the stage, thrusting into the feminine, the masculine thrusting into the feminine on a principle that is called the open thrust stage. But when you stand in the center of the stage, at the lip of the stage, you're in the center of the circle. And what I would do with great actors is to have them stand there and just to find their note and speak their note. And the building would literally, and normally the person or usually the person standing and saying, to be or not to be, that is the question, or whatever, they would burst into floods of tears because they would feel the whole of their nature, the whole of their soul being reflected back to them. To hold a mirror up to nature, as Shakespeare said.
Well, iambic pentameter, the greatest mantric frequencies are held inside of that ashtang, inside of that same kind of what we call nod, but the same. It's not just a rhythm, but it's a frequency.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it's so
And,
cool.
and then the heartbeat.
Yeah.
Be-boom, 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 be-boom.
I love it. I really could talk to you about this forever. I do want to hear about your new book because I know you've been prolific, and you have a new piece and a new, we were talking about before the interview started. It just feels like a huge kind of new part of what you're bringing to the planet is coming through this new book. Can we talk about it a little bit, Diana, the voice of change?
Yes, yes, please, please. Um, the process really began with the early murmurings of hashtag Me Too, because a number of the key women in Hollywood who eventually stepped forward to speak their truth about, no, I was raped by whomever, um, were clients of mine.
Right.
And they were very timorous and frightened about the whole process. And I gave them inspiration from, no, 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 you women are finding your voices because the next chapter of history will be written, or her story will be written by the women and the girls. So you have to step forward. So I was there backing them up and stepping forward. As a result of that, it felt that a huge wave took place, particularly in the United States, but that permeated the consciousness of the rest of the world. And so significant women stepped forward and became, at this moment, there are 9 leading women throughout the world who are governing nations. So in addition to Jacinta in New Zealand.
Right.
And I was wanting to bring forward a book and publish a book with my publisher called Angelic Activism. And they weren't that keen. I
Right.
thought it was an excellent book.
Yeah, it sounds
But
amazing.
but they said, look, can Stuart write about something else because you've got so many angel books in the way that publishers can do.
Yeah.
And my agent, my literary agent, said to me, but wait a moment, you worked with Diana. Why don't you write that? And I said, no, 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 no. Our relationship is completely confidential. I'm never going to do that. And she said, but the book that you'll write will be completely different. And in that moment, something occurred in my consciousness where it was almost as though I'd returned 20, 22 years, 21 years back to the time that Diana died. And she came right in and stood next to me and said, don't you remember the book that we talked about? And please, will you publish this book when my sons are married? And I remember her saying it. She was immensely prophetic, very intuitive. And so within 15 minutes, I saw the whole of the book. And I realized that what I needed to do was to not write another of those books about turning her life into a social diary or a court circular.
Right.
That we already have.
Right.
We know what happened autobiographically. But she was asking me to really represent her through her essence and to answer the unanswerable and to question the unquestionable of what was her life really all about? Was she killed? And what happened when she passed on August the 31st, 1997? What was that force that awakened the consciousness of 3.9 billion people?
Right.
3.9 billion people wept because one woman passed.
Yeah.
And where she passed, in this tunnel. 10 years ago, I was driving through that tunnel with a client. He was very happy because I'd helped him bridge this merger. He was a major CEO of a multinational. And there we were in his chauffeur-driven car going through. And he has an unusual intuition, does this man. And he said to me, this is where Diana died. Well, of course I knew. And he said, but in Roman times, this was the temple of Diana.
Wow.
And so I researched that, and he was absolutely right. The tunnel where she died was the Temple of Diana. The Romans left in approximately AD 75. They left Gaul, and of course there was the shrinking mechanism of the Roman Empire at that point. And then a tribe called the Parisi moved in, hence Paris. Although I was always told esoterically that the name of Paris arose from the Para-Isis, and indeed much of the city of Paris is very similar to the topographical geometry of Luxor and the Temple of Karnak and the Temple of Luxor, the Temple of Man. Anyway, that's another story.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
they were taken over by the Merovingians, who were feudal warlords, who deified all of their process through the presence of Diana. So they rebuilt the temple right on that spot. And they fought their duels there. And they had some form of folklore that the person who was vanquished in the duel passed through a portal at that point and became God's eyes on earth. And it was called the Pont de Almar, the Bridge of Souls.
Incredible.
So she chose to go in where there is a portal, a bridge of souls. And then, of course, you move into the Dark Ages, into medievalism, and the site became a hospice to help those who were dying to pass through. So this is just the beginning of what I've written about and trace the Spencer family who are linked with this lineage, because the Spencer family, Diana Spencer, is one of the oldest and most noble lineages in British aristocracy. And they can be traced all the way back through this lineage, all the way back to the Holy Grail.
Not
so this
surprising.
is what I write about. And how this beautiful, but in many ways very simple young woman, the people's princess, who was so delicate and empathic and loving and kind, suddenly emerged into the development of this beautiful radiance. And I write about the initiations that she went through with people like Mother Teresa, which was huge. And I wasn't party to the initiation, but I was with Diana in Calcutta when it took place. And she came out of this experience looking like a very, very different person from the one that was in. It was obvious that she had been gifted grace in the most extraordinary way from the divine.
Wow, what an incredible.
So that's what the book is all about. And of course, as the women of the world are, and this is what Diana really wanted, she wanted the vessel of her own process to be a vessel that any woman of the world, whether it be a woman called to office or a woman called to childbirth, that the women of the world could acquire the same degree of radiance through the management of their own emotional process, of understanding how, as empaths, we can develop energetic boundaries so that we can move safely through the world, but be as dangerous as we wish with the development of our destiny. And so I've included all of the exercises, all of the meditations, all of the affirmations, and explained what it is to be a chosen one, to be what it is to be an anointed one, and how that needs to be ritualized so that the rites of passage are absolutely fully embodied. They're not just simply ideas.
Which I feel like this is part of the shift in this age of Aquarius, that it can't just be that all of the initiation rites and the rituals are thrown out because maybe, they had some blood, blood was shed and misunderstandings and misappropriations of power and all the things that have happened. They can't just be thrown out, the baby with the bathwater. We have to renew and revitalize and restructure these initiation rites.
Mm, mm, mm. Yes, well put, really well put, because we know that every organization, every institution holds the resonance of the patriarchy. And really, what we're seeing is that that is no longer a usable formulae, that we need to redefine what this is all about. It's not usable because we know it's been caught in obfuscation, it's been caught in chaos, it's been caught in confusion, and it's been caught in this is who I am, but backstage I do whatever I wish to do, and most of it is immoral or immoral. So we're needing to redefine this. And therefore, we go back to the crucial jewels that I believe are held within our belief systems. We go right back into the very core of the fact that love is all there is and that fear is an hallucination. But how do we stabilize ourselves when we are experiencing fear so that we transcend, we become part of the transcendental conduct? Now, all of these initiations and rites of passage are, in essence, to do with this substance. It's just that whatever the energy is, the froth around the institution of ritual or initiation, it has been caught up in the patriarchal consciousness, and that will be pared away. I believe that you women will do this because if there's something, I mean, this is a sweeping generalization, I know, but as a collective force, the one thing that has always impressed me with women and the joy and my honor of working with groups of women is the absolute honesty that always brims from your hearts.
Yeah.
Get a group of women together, and it just takes one to say, "But I'm having great change." But the compassion to
Yeah.
ooze into the space, and then automatically this woman is held by her sisters, and immense processes of shift take place. I think that's just extraordinary. So of
Yeah.
course, you women will pare away all of the crap that's been going on, and we'll get back to the true essence of wonder and awe that lies within those holy instants of transmission where we transcend.
Well, I feel that I've already gone to meet you in those etheric temples on this very historic and very important solstice, and also the meeting that we have had here. After all these years, I know this was destined to be a transmission, and thank you so much for
Oh,
just I could just, your sound current is it's so healing that it's such a cure, and I thank you for sharing it with us.
thank you, thank you, thank you. I mean, it's just it's bliss to be with you. So
It is.
I, although I'm containing myself as a human, I also feel the ripples within my field and how they're connecting with your field and the many beings that are surrounding us, but at the same time, those who will be beyond this space of time, or beyond this space and this time. So it feels that what we've just committed ourselves to was an act of grace, one of a great possibility. So it's an absolute joy to have been here with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I want everyone to know how they can join you in this temple that you've created, these conversations, and just, follow and receive of your great gifts. Will you just mention the best ways that people can know more about
Thank you.
what you're
Yes.
doing?
I mean, of course, automatically people go to www.stewartpearce.com and then become bewildered because it's immensely corporate.
It's so cool.
So that the corporate site is for the people of the public domain. And then we need to go to www.dianathevoiceofchange.com, because then the secrets become revealed. So that's www.dianathevoiceofchange.com. And then, of course, there's www.theangelsofatlantis.com. And that's when the entire temple begins to open and we see the angels coming forth. I did ask them if they would commit themselves to a gentle revelation during our conversation. And the card that came through from the oracle, because I'm looking at 44 cards here, was the card of Gabriel, the great messenger, and who, for those of people who are feeling slightly confused, what's that? The angels have always appeared to me as orbs of light. All through my life, they've been orbs of light. I've always wanted to see a human being with wings, but I've never seen them. They're always beams of light or orbs of light. And Gabriel is saying, but you are blessed, because this is the card of benediction, that there are streams and streams of pranayama that are emerging from the angelic communion into your presence and into the extraordinary nature of the body politic that has opened around you in relation to your essential beliefs and traditions. So the angels, the messenger, well, you're a messenger. So
Yeah.
great blessings.
Thank you, and thank you. I'm very, very connected to Archangel Gabriel, so I'm not surprised that he's coming to make sure that we know it, we remember. That's a beautiful card too. Wow, what a transmission. Thank you. Just this is a blessing for all that will both hear this in many futures to come, and just all my love to you. And I can't wait to spend more time.
Namaste, namaste, namaste.
Namaste, Sadnam.
And,
Thank you,
and
Stuart.
Satnam, Satnam, and Satnam, best wishes for December the 21st.
As with you as well, and feel that I'm already there with you in that glorious 7 minutes. We did get to go to Egypt. We literally were in Egypt, right? Like as the whole world was shutting down, we were on a flight back to America, and and it was my first time, so I feel there was a big initiation before.
Wow. Oh, then
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about your experiences. I was there at the same time.
Really, yeah.
I was we were engaged in a retreat called Honoring the Priestess with 25 ladies over the world. That's another story about the priestess, the quality of Isis, the Divine Mother, and how she's bringing forth her priestesses at this time.
Yeah, she is, and I felt that I'm not surprised you were there, because I think that was just like the kind of wormhole that brought us into everything that's been happening in these past months and this past year. So, I mean, it's all hypersynchronicity and not chronological, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
yeah.
namaste.
Namaste, Sadnam.
I'll see you in January.
See you in January. Thank you, Stuart.
is a verb, love is a doing word. Fearless on my breath, gentle impulsation wakes me, makes me lighter. Fearless on my breath, teardrop on the fire. Fearless on my breath, teardrop on the fire. Fearless on my breath. Night of matter, blue flowers blossom. Fearless on my breath. Blue flowers blossom. Fearless on my breath. Teardrop on the fire. Fearless on my breath.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Reality Riffing. These are conversations that I think are important with people who are doing great things in the world about subject matters that need to be discussed. If you enjoyed the content, the conversation, please feel free to share with your people, share with your friends and family, rate the podcast below, and also subscribe.